Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, everyone. We are from Group 1, and today we are gonna explain a sociolinguistic subject, and that is a language choice in multilingual community. The subject includes three contents inside, and that is choosing your variety or code that will be presented by me, the glossia, which will be presented by Yoga, and last one is code switching that will be presented by Mas Billy. The first subject that I will explain to you now is about choosing variety or code. To make it simple, I already write the short explanation about it in the presentation. The first one is choosing linguistic repertoire. It is a variety of linguistic that a person has stored and used depending on the different environments. The second one is domain of language use. It is the place or where the interaction takes place in social context. And the third one is modeling variety or code. It's about the speaker that models the code choice depending on the different factors. And the last one is other social factors that modify code choice. So, what is your linguistic repertoire? Before we answer this question, we should understand first the term that will be used in our subject today, and that is variety or code. Variety or code is a broad term which includes different accent, different linguistic styles, different dialects, and different languages which contrast with each other for social reasons. Let's take a look at the Japanese language example in the presentation. In this example, we already know that Japanese language have a strata in their language, and it is used depend on the people you have interaction with. For example, ngokolugu can be used as common daily lives, while kromo alus is used when speaking to a person of a higher status. Linguistic repertoire is the set of skills and knowledge a person has of one or more languages, as well as their different varieties. Linguistic repertoire is built up hearing the different varieties used in the community. Usually, more formal varieties involve more conscious learning, but most varieties acquired with a little conscious effort. Let's take a look at the next topic. It's about domain. Domain is a number of typical interaction that have been relevant in describing patterns of code choice in speech community. It usually involves typical interaction between typical participants in typical settings. Let's take a look at the example in the presentation. We can see there are four tables there. It's the domain, the addressee, settings, and topics. Domain is used for capturing broad generalization about any speech community. It draws three important social factors in code choice, and that is participant, settings, and topics. The participant is the addressee here. It's the person we are talking to. Setting is where we have the conversation, and topics is the topic is what we are talking about. And in this example, we can see that in the domain of family, the addressee or the person we are talking to is the grandparents with a setting at home with the topics family matters. Modeling variety or code choice. By using information about the domain of use, we can draw a very simple model summarizing the norm of the language in the community. Let's take a look at the example in the presentation. In the domain of family with grandparents, the variety or code we use is Japanese. In education domain with our lecturer, we use English, while in friendship domain with our friend, we use Bahasa Indonesia. Let's take a look at the other factors that is relevant to this code choice. This is the social factors that affect code choice: social distance, status or relationship between people, dimension of the formalities, and the function or goal of the interaction. So in describing the code used in particular communities, the relevant social factors may not fit in the domains we are talking before. More specific social factors often needed to be included, and that is why this is so important to include these other social factors in determining the varieties of language used in that particular communities. Let's take a look at the modeling variety or code choice example before. In the domain of family, talking with your grandparents and talking with your younger sibling, we probably use different variety or code because we have different status or relationship with our grandparents and our younger siblings. With our grandparents, we use more formal language, we use more formal variety, while when we talking to younger siblings, we use more non-formal varieties. And that is why I say that it's important to include the other social factors that I explained before in determining the varieties of language used in that community. Next, we will be talking about diglossia, and it will be presented by my friend Yoga.
Alright, now we are going to talk about diglossia. A word diglossia originated from Greek, which means a state of being bilingual. Meanwhile, in English, it is a situation in which a community uses two different varieties of one language or two different languages which have different varieties. So, variety classified into two varieties. The first one is high variety or H variety. High variety is the standard language usually used in education or government field. And then we learn this variety, this standard language in a school. We learn about its rule, how to use it properly, how to use it according to its rules. So it is a standard language. And then high variety is usually used in educational things like a textbook, handbook in school, and then literature, and etc. So another one is we have low variety or L variety. L variety is a language or dialect which is used in a daily conversation. And we learn this variety since we were born, since we were baby, like our parents taught us about this kind of variety, and we learn this kind of variety from our surrounding, from our environment. uh, Also, this variety is used to 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 have like uh, a daily conversation, and then yeah, we use it in daily conversation, like. But we also, but there's also like folklore which use this kind of variety. Next, variety is common around the world, especially in Arabian countries. uh, Arabic language has two different varieties. The first one is high varieties and then low varieties. In high varieties, they have classical Arabic, which is used in literature, and then it is used in Holy Quran. Also, they have modern Arabic. They use it for educational purposes and then government purposes, like such as like speech, formal speech, president formal speech, and then they learn it in school as well. And usually, this modern Arabic, these varieties, is used as a bridge communication for Arabian countries. And then they have low varieties, which is colloquial Arabic. Colloquial Arabic is a dialect which they use in their daily basis, like conversation, talking with family, and etc. Uh, as we know, like Arabian countries, there's a lot of Arabian countries, which means they use the same language but different dialect. For example, like in in Iraq, they have Iraq dialect, and then in Iran, Palestine dialect, and etc. So they have different dialect according to each places. For example, like what I said before, Palestine, Iraq, and then Qatar, Morocco, and stuffs. In Indonesia, meanwhile, at least people can speak two different languages. For example, in Jogja, people can 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 use two different languages, which are Japanese and then Bahasa Indonesia. So usually, parents teach Japanese like in house, like since their child born, and they teach him about Japanese, but they rarely teach Indonesia. So so in Indonesia we learn uh, bahasa Indonesia in schools. So for example, I have an experience. So this conclusion is based on my experience. So I I lived in Bandung for 15 years since I was born. My parents taught my parents taught me Sundanese, where I live in Bandung, and they taught me Sundanese. Uh, like in daily basis, I and my parents use Sundanese language in our house, and when I play with my friend, yeah, like uh, how I communicate with people around me in my place, like our houses or neighborhood. And Bahasa Indonesia, I learned it in school. Like a lot of people use it in school. Like my teacher used it in school, and then the textbook used Indonesian language, and etc. So I come into conclusion that Indonesia use two different languages, but one of the languages is considered as low varieties and high varieties. For example, Sundanese is a language, and I considered it as low varieties because, like, I only learn it in house. Like, my parent taught me about this, and then how I communicate with my friend in my neighborhood use Sundanese. Those Sundanese is also taught in school, but I didn't study, I didn't learn it intensely, like my school didn't teach me about its rule, its grammar, and stuff. Like, so, like, they just uh, taught me, like, Sundanese is not like intensely intensely taught to me, but Indonesia is use a lot of people use Indonesia in bahasa Indo a lot of people use bahasa Indonesia in our school, like elementary school and then high school. A lot of people use it for educational stuff and government stuff in Bandung as well. So I come to the conclusion that Sundanese is low varieties, and then Bahasa Indonesia is the high varieties one. And then there's an attitude that people show towards both varieties. For each varieties, it is respected, admired, and it is considered as prestigious varieties. Meanwhile, L varieties, it is not that respected and then non-prestigious. We also have polyglossia. It is a situation in which a community uses three codes or varieties for each particular purposes. For example, in Singapore, they use more than three varieties or codes or languages. The first one is English. They use it for government field, like they make an announcement to the people, to Singaporean people, and then they use Mandarin in newspaper, Chinese newspaper, and then they use Cantonese in in house, like for family, and then they use Hokkien for example, when we place an order in restaurant. So English and Mandarin is considered as high varieties. Meanwhile, Cantonese, and in Hokkien, it is considered as low varieties.
And the last one, code switching, will be presented by Mas Billy.
Okay, next on today's presentation is code switching. Well, what is exactly code switching? Well, it is basically the practice of moving back and forth between two languages or between two dialects or registers of the same language at one time. Code switching occurs far more often in conversation than in writing. It is also called code mixing and style shifting. It is studied by linguists to examine when people do it, such as under what circumstances do bilingual speakers switch from one to another. And it is studied by sociologists also to determine why people do it, such as how it relates to their belonging to a group or the surrounding context of conversation. Okay, next, why people use code switching? Well, actually, there are a lot of reasons why people use it, but I'm just gonna put four of them in here. The first one, sorry, people may use code switching to hide fluency or memory problems in the second language. The second one, code switching is used to mark switching from informal situation to formal situation. The third one, code switching is used to exert control, especially between parents and children. And the last one, code switching is used to align speakers with other in specific situation. And not to forget, code switching also function to announce specific identities, create certain meanings, and facilitate particular interpersonal relationship. Okay, next, there are three types of code switching. The first one is intersentential. In intersentential code switching, the language switch is done at sentence boundaries, words or phrases at the beginning or end of a sentence. This type is seen most often in fluent bilingual speakers. For example, it is said by mean manager, "Kalau kamu terlambat kerja lagi, you better be dead." That intersentential. The second one is intrasentential. In intrasentential code switching, the shift is done in the middle of sentence, with no interruption, hesitation, or pauses to indicate a shift. The speaker is usually unaware of the shift. For example, kamu tahu nggak sih, doi itu literally cakep banget loh. The different types of switch occur within the clause level and within the word level. The last one, extrasentential or text switching. This is the switching of either a single word or a text phrases from one language to another. This type is common in intrasentential switches. It involves the insertion of a text from one language into an utterance in another language. For example, dia itu sukanya emang gitu-gituan loh, if you know what I mean. Nah, kayak gitu tuh. Pokoknya seperti itu. Okay, that's all from me in code switching. Thank you very much.